Something just shifted in Cleveland, and nobody saw it coming. No press conferences, no bold statements, no headlines handed to the media. Instead, Shedeur Sanders and Todd Monken quietly shut everything down, and that silence is starting to make a lot of people nervous. Because while everyone expected noise, drama, and questions, they got the opposite. Every single day, Sanders is already in the building. Early, no cameras, no hype, just work, throwing, studying, building chemistry with teammates behind closed doors. And here's the part that's catching people off guard: it doesn't look like a rookie trying to prove himself. It looks like someone who already believes the job is his. And Monken, he's not slowing it down, he's not creating distance. If anything, he's leaning into it, working closely with Sanders, letting him grow into the system without resistance. That's where things get interesting. Because the same media voices that doubted him are now questioning the silence. They're calling it strange, even risky, but is it really? Or is this the kind of quiet takeover most people don't recognize until it's too late? Because behind the scenes, something is building, something controlled, something intentional. And if this is what it looks like before the season even starts, what happens when the spotlight finally hits? Every single day, something is happening in Cleveland, and most people still aren't catching it. Shedeur Sanders isn't showing up like a typical rookie. There's no late arrivals, no easing into the system, no waiting to be told what to do. He's already there, early, quiet, and locked in before anyone even starts paying attention. No cameras following him around, no social media moments, no extra noise, just work. And it's not a one-time thing. It's every day. That's what's starting to hit people differently, because this isn't the usual rookie trying to impress coaches type of energy. This feels calculated, intentional, like someone who already sees himself as QB1, not someone hopping to become it. While others are still talking about depth charts and potential competitions, Sanders is inside the facility building real chemistry. Throwing with receivers, syncing timing, studying the playbook, and getting familiar with everything behind the scenes. Reports and clips show him working with guys like Jerry Jeudy, not just casually, but with purpose, like they're already preparing for real games, not just practice reps. And here, where it starts to get uncomfortable for some people. Because this level of focus wasn't what many expected. There were narratives before he arrived, questions about whether he'd adjust, whether the moment might be too big, whether he'd need time to develop. But instead of hesitation, what they're seeing is control. Calm but confident, quiet but commanding. And that kind of presence shifts the energy in a building fast. Teammates notice who's first in and last out. Coaches notice who's asking questions and actually applying the answers. And when that player is a quarterback, it hits even harder, because quarterbacks aren't just judged by talent, they're judged by how they carry themselves. Sanders isn't trying to prove it with words, he's letting the routine speak for him. But that's also where the tension begins. Because when someone walks in and immediately starts moving like the job already belongs to them, it forces everyone else to react. Veterans start watching closer, other quarterbacks start feeling the pressure, and the media, they start looking for cracks. So far, they haven't found many. And that's the part no one really wants to say out loud. Because if this is how he's operating before the season even starts, no spotlight, no announcements, just consistent, focused work, then this might not be a rookie story at all. This might be something much bigger already taking shape. But the real question is, how long can something like this stay quiet before it turns into something nobody can ignore? At some point, the entire situation inside Cleveland quietly flipped, and most people didn't even notice when it happened. Because not long ago, there were real questions about how Shedeur Sanders would be handled. Would he be developed slowly? Would coaches hold him back? Would he even get a real shot early on? That uncertainty was everywhere. But now, the tone feels completely different. And it starts with Todd Monken. Instead of creating distance, Monken seems to be doing the exact opposite. He's leaning in, working closely with Sanders, spending time with him, and most importantly, trusting him to grow into the system instead of forcing him to sit back and wait. That's a huge shift from what many expected coming into this situation. What's even more interesting is how the messaging has changed. Early on, the conversation sounded cautious. There was talk about development, about needing time, about refining his game. But more recent reports suggest something else entirely. There's been praise, strong praise, the kind that hints at real belief behind the scenes. Words like playmaker are being used more confidently. There's even been talk, whether fully confirmed or not, that he could be ready to compete right away, possibly even for that week 1 spot. And that's where things start to feel different. Because coaches don't just throw that kind of language around unless they're seeing something consistently. It's not about one good throw or one good practice. It's about patterns, repetition, daily habits that prove a player can handle more responsibility. And Sanders, he's giving them exactly that. Each day he shows up, puts in the work, and builds trust not just with coaches but with the entire system around him. That kind of steady presence forces a decision. You either slow him down or you let him take control. Right now, it feels like they're choosing the second option. But here, where it gets even more interesting. They're not going out of their way to announce it. There's no big declaration, no official "he's our guy" moment. Instead, it's happening quietly, through reps, through meetings, through the way Monken interacts with him compared to everyone else in the room. And sometimes, that silence says more than any press conference ever could. Because when a coaching staff truly believes in a player, they don't always need to sell it to the media. They just build around it behind the scenes. Still, not everyone is buying into this shift. From the outside, there's still skepticism. Some voices are questioning whether this is moving too fast. Others are wondering if the team is putting too much trust in someone who hasn't taken an NFL snap yet. And to be fair, those concerns aren't completely out of nowhere. But at the same time, they're not inside that building. They're not seeing the day-to-day work. They're not part of those meetings. They're not watching how quickly things are starting to align between quarterback and coach. And that disconnect is where the tension really starts to build. Because while the public is still debating what might happen, inside Cleveland, it feels like decisions are already being shaped. Quietly, deliberately. And if that alignment between Sanders and Monken keeps growing at this pace, the rest of the league might not realize what's happening until it's already too late. But here, where the story takes a sharp turn, because outside that building, the narrative looks completely different. While Shedeur Sanders is quietly putting in work, a wave of doubt is starting to build, and it's getting louder by the day. You've got analysts, commentators, and media voices throwing out questions that don't quite match what's actually happening. Some are suggesting he's not fully involved. Others are hinting that he's not truly leading yet. And a few are even pushing the idea that Cleveland might be moving too fast with him. But here's the thing, most of that is speculation. There's been a lot of buzz online, with reports claiming Sanders might not have full control of the locker room or that he still has a lot to prove before being taken seriously. And sure, that kind of conversation isn't unusual for a young quarterback. It comes with the territory. But the timing of it, that's what stands out. Because instead of slowing down, Sanders is doing the opposite. He's showing up early, he's building chemistry, he's working directly with teammates. None of that lines up with the idea that he's somehow disconnected or falling behind. And that disconnect is where things start to feel intentional. It almost feels like there's a split forming. On one side, you've got what's actually happening inside the facility: quiet work, growing trust, real development. On the other side, you've got a narrative being shaped from the outside, driven more by expectation than reality. Even voices like Rex Ryan have been known to question situations like this, often leaning into strong opinions that don't always reflect what's happening behind closed doors. And while those takes generate attention, they don't always tell the full story. Because inside the building, the signs point in a completely different direction. Players are meeting Sanders. Teammates are working with him. There's visible interaction, visible chemistry, and a growing sense that he's becoming a real presence in that locker room. That's not something you fake, and it's definitely not something that goes unnoticed by the people who matter most. So where's all this doubt really coming from? Part of it is expectation. Before he even arrived, people had already formed opinions about how this would play out. Some expected struggles, others expected delays, and now that those expectations aren't matching reality, there's resistance. It's easier to question the situation than to admit the possibility that things might actually be ahead of schedule. But that's what makes this moment so interesting. Because the more the outside noise grows, the more it highlights just how quiet and focused things are on the inside. And usually when those two worlds don't match, something bigger is happening beneath the surface. The real question is whether the media is right or wrong. It's this: what happens when the results start matching the work? Because if that moment comes, all the speculation, all the doubt, and all the noise won't just fade away. It'll flip overnight. And this is where everything really starts to flip, because the people inside the locker room aren't buying the outside narrative at all. When Titus Howard first linked up with Shedeur Sanders, it wasn't some quiet, forgettable interaction. It immediately stood out, not because Sanders was loud or trying to impress, but because of how naturally he carried himself. Howard didn't hesitate when talking about him either. He pointed out the confidence right away. The kind of confidence you actually want in a quarterback. Not forced, not over the top, just steady and real. And that's important because players can tell the difference instantly. You can't fake that in a locker room full of veterans. But it goes deeper than just confidence. There's been a lot of talk about Sanders' pedigree, his background, and everything that comes with it. And while that might sound like hype from the outside, inside the building it translates differently. To players, it means experience. It means he's been around pressure, around expectations, around big moments. And when they see how he moves day to day, it starts to match that reputation. That's when respect kicks in. And respect in a locker room isn't given, it's earned fast or not at all. What's happening here is subtle but powerful. Sanders isn't walking and trying to dominate conversations or demand attention. He's letting his preparation do the talking. The way he shows up early, the way he interacts with teammates, the way he stays consistent. All of that builds a certain kind of trust, and once that trust starts spreading, it changes the entire energy of the room. Howard's reaction is just one example of that shift. Because when a veteran openly says he's excited to work with a quarterback, that's not random. That's a signal. Offensive linemen especially don't throw that kind of support around lightly. They're the ones putting their bodies on the line every snap. If they believe in you, it means they see something worth protecting. And right now, it looks like they do. There's also something else happening that's harder to measure, but just as important. Sanders is earning attention without asking for it. Teammates are noticing how he commands the room without needing to speak over anyone. How he brings a certain presence just by being consistent. That kind of leadership doesn't always show up in interviews or headlines, but inside a team environment, it stands out immediately. And once a few players start recognizing it, it spreads. Suddenly, it's not just one guy backing him, it's multiple voices, different positions, different personalities, all seeing the same thing from different angles. That's when it becomes real. Because at that point, it's no longer about hype or projections, it's about what players are experiencing firsthand. And here's the part that most people on the outside are missing. Locker rooms don't lie. You can debate stats, you can argue opinions, you can push narratives all day, but inside that building, players know who they trust, they know who they believe in, and they know who they're willing to go to battle with. Right now, signs are pointing in one direction. And if that support keeps growing the way it is, this won't just be a competition anymore. It'll be a takeover. And now we get to the part nobody wants to say out loud. The quarterback room in Cleveland is already starting to tilt. Because when you really look at it, this isn't shaping up like a normal competition. On paper, it might still be open. But in reality, the balance is shifting fast, and it's shifting toward Shedeur Sanders. He's not just participating anymore, he's setting the tone. Every rep, every meeting, every interaction is building a case that's getting harder to ignore. And when a quarterback starts stacking days like that, something subtle happens. He stops looking like an option and starts looking like the default. That's exactly where things feel like they're heading right now. Now compare that to the rest of the room. There's still talk about Deshaun Watson, but a lot of that conversation feels more like leftover narrative than current reality. Injuries, inconsistency, and off-field noise have surrounded his situation for a while now. And while nothing is officially decided, there's been growing skepticism around whether he can truly take control of this team again. That doesn't mean he's out, but it does mean the door is wide open. And Sanders, he's walking through it. Then you've got the possibility of other names entering the mix. Maybe a rookie, maybe a late addition. There's always speculation about teams bringing in competition, but let's be real, any new quarterback walking into that room is starting from zero. New system, new teammates, no established rhythm. Meanwhile, Sanders is already building that foundation daily. So even if someone else gets added, they're not catching up overnight, they're chasing. And that's a completely different position to be in. What makes this even more interesting is how quietly it's happening. There's no official announcement, no headline declaring him QB1, but the signs are there if you're paying attention. He's acting like the starter. Teammates are responding to him like a leader. Coaches are giving him opportunities like someone they trust. Put all that together and you start to see a pattern. Now, to be fair, there are still voices out there saying this is premature. Some believe it's too early to crown anyone. Others think a veteran presence could still change the dynamic. And those are valid points. This is the NFL and things can shift quickly. But here's the reality. Momentum matters. And right now Sanders has it. He's not waiting for the competition to define itself. He's forcing the situation to revolve around him. That's a different kind of approach, one that doesn't rely on opportunity being handed over but instead takes control before anyone else can. And once that momentum builds inside a locker room, it's hard to stop. Because now it's not just about talent anymore. It's about perception. It's about trust. It's about who the team believes gives them the best chance to win. And if that belief continues to grow around Sanders, then this competition might not last much longer at all. At that point, it won't be about who could start. It'll be about who's already taken the job without anyone officially saying it. But here's the part most people are completely overlooking, and it might be the biggest advantage of all. Shedeur Sanders isn't just competing with talent, he's winning something far more important behind the scenes. Influence. And no one is really talking about it the right way. Because when people hear influence or politics in a locker room, they instantly think it's fake or forced, like someone trying to win popularity instead of respect. But that's not what's happening here. This feels different. This feels natural. There's been a lot of buzz online, with some suggesting Sanders is just trying to get guys on his side early. That he understands the optics, the importance of being liked, and is playing the long game. And sure, that could be part of it. Quarterbacks have to manage personalities, expectations, and relationships. But that's only half the story. Because players don't rally around someone just because they're trying to be liked. They rally around someone they believe in. And right now, that belief is starting to build. You see it in small moments, teammates showing support, players engaging with him early, even subtle things like body language, energy in conversations, how guys respond when he's around. Those aren't things you can manufacture. They happen when people genuinely buy into what you bring. That's the hidden edge. Sanders doesn't need to walk into the room demanding authority. He's earning it without forcing anything. And that's rare. Most quarterbacks spend months, sometimes years, trying to build that kind of connection. He's accelerating it. And that changes everything. Because football isn't just about throws, reads, and stats. It's about trust. When the game is on the line, players don't just follow the most talented guy, they follow the one they believe in, the one they feel comfortable going to battle with. If Sanders already has that, then he's ahead in a way that doesn't show up on any stat sheet. And here, where it gets even more interesting. This kind of influence creates momentum that's hard to stop. Once a few key players buy in, others start to follow. Not because they're told to, but because they see something real forming. It spreads naturally through the locker room, building a quiet wave of support that becomes stronger with every interaction. By the time people on the outside notice it, it's already established. That's why this matters so much. Because even if the competition looks open on paper, influence can tilt the entire situation. Coaches notice who players gravitate toward, they notice who commands attention without trying, and when that aligns with performance, that's when decisions get made. Quietly. So while the media debates stats and depth charts, something deeper is happening inside that building. Sanders is building a foundation that goes beyond football. And if that foundation keeps growing, then this won't just be about who throws the best pass or knows the playbook the fastest. It'll be about who the team has already chosen, without ever having to say it out loud. But here, where things get messy, because not everyone is on board with what's happening. In fact, there's a growing wave of resistance, and it's not all coming from where you'd expect. There's been a lot of buzz online, with rumors suggesting that not everyone inside or around the organization is comfortable with how fast Shedeur Sanders is rising. Some reports claim there were earlier attempts to slow his momentum, to keep him in a more controlled role instead of letting him take over too quickly. Now none of that is officially confirmed. But the timing of these conversations, that's what makes people pay attention. Because just as Sanders is gaining traction, building chemistry, earning trust, stepping into a leadership role, suddenly the noise starts getting louder. Questions about whether he's ready, doubts about whether he's being pushed too fast. Even subtle suggestions that others in the quarterback room deserve more consideration. And then there's the situation around Dillon Gabriel. Some fans online have speculated that he was once seen as a preferred option in certain circles, and that there may have been internal support leaning in his direction earlier on. There are even claims floating around that tension existed behind the scenes as roles started to shift. Again, nothing fully verified. But the fact that these conversations are happening at all, that tells you something. Because in the NFL, when a new quarterback starts gaining real momentum, it almost always creates friction. Not necessarily open conflict, but quiet resistance. People who had different expectations, different plans, different bets placed on how things would play out. And when those expectations get challenged, pushback follows. That's what this feels like. Not a clear divide, not an open battle, but a subtle clash between what was expected and what's actually happening. On one side, you've got Sanders steadily building his position day by day without saying much. On the other side, you've got narratives trying to slow that rise, questioning it, reframing it, even downplaying it. But here, the key detail most people miss. If there was nothing happening, there wouldn't be this much noise. Controversy doesn't appear out of nowhere. Rumors don't spread without a reason. Even speculation usually follows some kind of shift, something changing behind the scenes that people are reacting to. And right now, that something looks a lot like control slipping away from the old expectations. Because the more Sanders keeps showing up, performing, and earning trust, the harder it becomes to hold onto previous narratives. That's when resistance turns into desperation. Not loud desperation, but subtle, framed as concern, packaged as analysis, delivered as just asking questions. But underneath it, it's the same thing. Doubt trying to keep up with momentum. And here's the reality. Momentum usually wins. Because once a player reaches a certain point, once the locker room starts leaning his way, once coaches begin trusting him more, once the energy shifts, it becomes incredibly difficult to reverse that direction. At that point, it's not about stopping the rise anymore. It's about how long people can pretend it isn't happening. And now it all comes down to this, because what's happening in Cleveland doesn't look like a competition anymore. It looks like a takeover already in motion. Shedeur Sanders didn't walk in asking for the job, he didn't campaign for it, he didn't need headlines or hype to build his case. Instead, he did something far more dangerous. He made it feel natural. Day by day, rep by rep, interaction by interaction, he's been shifting the entire energy of that building, quietly, consistently, without forcing anything. And that's why this feels different. Because most rookies try to earn the starting role. Sanders is making it look like it already belongs to him. Think about it. He's first in the building, locked into the playbook, building chemistry with teammates before anyone else even gets going. Coaches are working with him, not holding him back. Veterans are starting to speak on him with respect, not hesitation. That's not potential anymore. That's presence. And presence is what separates a player from a leader. Meanwhile, the outside world is still debating, still questioning, still trying to figure out who should start, who might compete, who could challenge him. Names get thrown around, scenarios get built, narratives keep shifting. But inside that building, it feels like a decision is already forming. Not announced, not confirmed, but understood. Because when a quarterback reaches this point, when he has the work ethic, the trust, and the locker room leaning his way, the conversation changes. It's no longer about if he can take the job. It becomes about who could possibly take it from him. And right now, there isn't a clear answer. That's what makes this so powerful. This isn't just about talent, it's not just about stats or arm strength or mobility, it's about control, it's about influence, it's about who the team believes in when everything is on the line. And Sanders is checking every one of those boxes before the season even begins. So while the media keeps searching for cracks, while critics keep throwing out doubts, while speculation keeps trying to slow the momentum, the reality keeps getting stronger. He's not waiting for the moment. He's creating it. And if this pace continues, if the chemistry keeps building, if the trust keeps growing, if the performances start matching the preparation, then this won't just be a breakout story. It'll be a shift. A shift in leadership. A shift in expectations. A shift in who controls the future of that franchise. So the real question is whether Shedeur Sanders can become the starter. It's this. Has he already taken the job, and everyone else just hasn't caught up yet?